Neutron Boy Genius for the Nintendo GameCube. This is by far one of my least favorite games. Why? Well, let's start off with the company who produced it, THQ. I'm quite sure you're familiar with them. THQ takes big licenses and gets small developers to make games to support the license. For developers, this sounds like a very good idea. However, what makes this a bad thing is how THQ always seems to be extremely focused on cashing in on the hype. They'll push the developers to develop a game fast, and quality is the price. Now, that isn't to say THQ is the absolute worst. They have released decent games every now and then. This game is actually an exception, as it came a full year after the film's release date. That would lead anyone to assume that this would be one of their better games, when it's really the opposite. I got this game with my GameCube on Christmas 2003. Now, the GameCube games I got around that time aside from this were the Haunted Mansion, Strike Extra Large, Pac-Man World 2, and Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3 Strike. Out of all of those games, this was by far the worst, and I easily have the worst memories with this game. Not just out of those games, but out of my entire collection, and I have a lot of games. Now, I'm going to take a slightly different approach with this review. First, I'll go and talk about the game's overall quality through categories like I usually do, before going into detail and describing the game's levels. Presentation-wise, this is one of the ugliest games I've seen from last gen. Honestly, it looks almost as bad as Animal Crossing. All three mainstream consoles at the time could do much better than this, especially the GameCube. I mean, just look at Rogue Squadron 2, and that was a friggin' launch title. The soundtrack, on the other hand, isn't bad. It's not Chris Wolfsbeck good, but it's one of the better things about the game. The controls are a mixed bag. For the most part, they are very tight and responsive, but when you're on Goddard, it becomes a bit harder to control. Also, the pause menu in this game is loathsome. In order to properly select anything, you'll have to tap the A button as lightly as humanly possible, or else the screen will start flickering between the regular pause menu and the sound options. Now, the game's biggest problems are the lack of camera control, and it needed it. Trust me, I know. Plus, the biggest problem of all is the bad level design, which I will point out a few times. Now, I'm going to describe the game in its entirety. To be honest, this is a pretty good hub world, and it's appropriate with the license. Each room of Jimmy's lab represents a different option. There's a room that leads to the main game, another room where you can alter sound effects, volume, music volume, and control layout. And there's a third room where you can see character profiles and other bonus data. Overall, I think this is where they put the most effort. I have a few complaints about it though. The biggest one being the loading system. Saving is simple enough, but loading, dear merciful God, it's one of the worst loading systems ever. You'll select your saved data, it will load, and eventually it'll tell you it's finished loading. You'll try to escape the loading screen, but it won't let you. Instead, it'll make you load the same data over and over and over and over again until it thinks it's done loading. It's a friggin' nightmare. This is basically a training level to get used to the game, and it's easily one of the best levels in the game. Why? Because there aren't any real design issues. It's just going around boring maps and collecting items. However, something I should point out about this level is that it makes no sense. It's based off the scene in the movie where Jimmy goes to Retroland on the opening night. So you think on opening night this place would be crowded as hell. It was in the movie. But here, no, it's a freaking ghost town. But that's not what doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense is how the front door is closed, and you get in by breaking in. I thought this was opening night, not a week before opening night. All the kids are talking about how they snuck out. Okay, how about how they snuck in? The maps don't make sense either. Yeah, kids, come to our theme park. Get sucked up by a tornado, evade falling structures, and even fall in burning lava. In this level, you have to collect 3 missing pieces of Jimmy's rocket, and you'll go around smashing aliens. Simple enough. That is until you encounter the hell that is the ant hole. Here, your enemies are giant ants that are ready to kill.
Look! What the heck is that? It's a giant ant lion!
Here is where that level design becomes incredibly apparent. Especially at this jump. I have another friend who has this game for the PlayStation 2. Unlike me, he just gave up here and never touched the game since. In my experience, you can jump all you want, even leap from the very edge of this platform, but you won't make it. The only way to make it is by pressing the A and B buttons in a very specific order, which will allow you to glitch through the platform and get on top of it. The only way to get past this freaking jump is to perform an odd glitch. I am not making this up. I haven't seen the movie in almost a decade, and yet, remember the scene when they're caught in a deadly asteroid field? We left that part out. Instead we get, "Oh no, the aliens scared away the kids! We need to go all over the asteroid repeatedly in order to find them!" The level design in this isn't as bad as it is annoying. The only real problem is the fact that it can be hard to tell where you're going to land in the middle of a jump. However, if this game had camera control, that wouldn't be much of an issue. Okay, let me ask you all a question. How do you like your video game levels? Linear and action-packed? Non-linear but straightforward enough so you can reach the end without much trouble? Or maybe even a big puzzle that takes hours to get through? Alright, how about long, boring, and utterly monotonous? That's this level, alright. Here you have to go inside the asteroid, slide down this path before running down a long, boring path with very little variety. And when I say it's long, I mean it. This would put any kid to sleep. I am not joking. However, what makes this level even worse is the ending. Here you end up in this room with this big contraption, Cindy trapped behind a large laser barrier, and no instructions, or even a clue to where you have to go or what you need to do. After running around hopelessly for a while, you'll find these paths, but they're hard to tell apart right away, which means you'll often skip the right path. Plus, you can't see where you're going, and there's no camera rotation. Eventually, you'll find these green things, and you throw these in this door on top of the contraption, and therefore deactivating the laser barrier. And again, there is nothing telling you to do that. You have to just experiment. Just run around and experiment trying to find out what the hell works. My friends, welcome to hell! Alright. Seeing how the levels got progressively worse, my expectations are at an all-time low. What I'm about to see is probably going to disgust me in the worst possible way.
Alright, Goddard. We have to find out where the Yokians are keeping all of our parents.
Holy crap! Not only is the music awesome, but this level is good! It's actually fun! The platforming is good, you can actually see where you're going, and it has enough action to keep you interested. However, the voice acting is at an all-time low in this level, which actually makes it pretty funny.
You made me so mad! I could just boil! Sending me regards!
If the whole game was of this quality, I wouldn't hate it at all. This level. This fucking level! While the previous level was a wonderful breath of fresh air, this one is a steep plunge, diving into the very depths of hell. Be warned, as my most hated childhood memories are resurfacing. The level starts off with this ridiculously boring climb up this long ramp. This would make anyone turn off the game immediately, but no, it gets worse. Far worse. Then you have to use guard to kill some aliens to deactivate Carl's father's mind control device. Then you see the worst looking 3D model I've ever seen. Holy mother of God, does that look bad! This makes the original Lotus Turbo Challenge look like Lair, and that came out in 1990 for a 1987 computer. That's when we reach it. The horrible room of death. The room that wasted countless hours of my precious childhood. The essence of shit. The room of gears and conveyor belts. I hate this room with my very soul. I despise it. I completely and entirely loathe it. Just the very thought brings out a pure rage. Now, just like most of the platforming in this game, it's difficult to see where you're going to land. And since there's no ground in this stage, that makes it even worse. The platforms you're supposed to land on move constantly. This and the previous flaw I mentioned generate a deadly combination. This room drove me crazy as a kid. Every time I played it, my nerves were shot. I screamed at every game over, and I blamed myself every time. Therefore, I would try harder and harder. Each time led to disaster. This happened to me with other games like Rogue Squadron 3 and Pac-Man World War 2. However, in those games, I could do something else. I could relax and also prepare myself better for whatever level I was stuck at. Here, I was stuck. Plain and simple. I couldn't do anything else. Plus, another thing. Those games were fair. This isn't. Now, you might be thinking I'm complaining too much out of retrospect. But wait, I left out the worst part. You see, eventually I did make it to the end. And with only one life to spare, out of excitement I ran to the next platform. And I fell down a hole I couldn't have possibly seen or predicted. You see, guys, that's not only bad level design, but on top of that, that's a good reason to have fucking camera control, you retards! If it's beyond your programming skills, then make the fucking level actually fair. It's called testing your game and making sure it's entirely playable. Video games are supposed to be entertainment, and especially if your game is targeted towards children. You should, I don't know, not pull stupid shit like that. Those few pixels of a space I hate with my soul. I was expecting I had to jump, but not so easy to tell how far you have to jump from. This is a pure example of how not to make a game. You might be thinking I'm complaining about the game being too hard for me, but no. Look at the Contra games. Those can be ridiculously challenging, but here's the thing. At least it's a fair challenge. If you die in those games, it's actually your fault. God. After that miserable excuse for level design, you have to avoid the ugliest 3D models' attacks and trick it into taking down these gun towers before fighting the lamest final boss ever. Good lord, even CJ from Street Combat was more threatening! After that embarrassment, do you get any reward? Not really. The ending is really damn bad. Basically, it's, Mommy, Daddy, I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay, son. Seeing how we almost died thanks to you. Anyway, let's go home. Yay! After you do this to the player, reward us like that? Well, in conclusion, it's not the worst game ever, but it's still crap. Most of the time, it's just plain boring. However, it can go from that to loathsome pretty damn quickly. Overall, this game seems like it was put together within 3 to 4 months. Far from a whole year. I would like to say it's worth playing just to get to the awesome Alien City level, but it's not. Unless you know someone who has it and has gone to that point without losing any and all sanity. If that's not the case, then just stay away from it. It's not worth your time.